episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to this very special episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And today, two of my very favorites, although one is only here and one's website is buffering and he's not here. But we welcome America's most respected detective, Phil Waters, who is joining us from the Big Island of Hawaii. And it appears that after the 977th episode, Scott Duffey's browser is not working. And I just had a Phil and Scott moment, which I'm going to tell you about momentarily. And this, by the way, is not just any Phil and Scott episode. If you look at the thumbnail, please do. This is story time with Phil and Scott. This is story time with Phil and Scott. But the problem is we don't have Scott. So in real time, once again, it's probably the seventh time this week that we're doing this. I'm going to have to figure things out on the fly. And kind of as we are doing this, Scott Duffey has been working on a special side job that I cannot reveal. And I don't know if he might be out of typical web or internet service, because the stuff he's doing is in a highly secured area and a very remote part of Pennsylvania that no one on planet Earth is allowed to know about. Phil Waters, have you heard from Scott Duffey since the last time I heard from Scott Duffey? He says he's trying to restart his browser.
Well, he was using Firefox, and he needs to be using Chrome. So I think that's the big issue. So,
and Phil, do I detect a cold of your own? I have been battling coronavirus, but do you have a cold?
No. It's just it happens to be 7 a.m. here.
Oh,
and, so you're getting my just getting up in the morning voice.
Oh, there you go. It looks beautiful there for 7. What time does the sun rise in Hawaii on the Big Island?
It starts to pop up 5:30ish, somewhere around there. It seems like,
And has Nugget awakened for the day, or is Nugget already napping?
Nugget did not spend the night here last night. We went to a community gathering over our water issues here in Kohala. And so we got back. She apparently had gone down the road to eat and was further detained. But we expect to see her probably sometime today.
Well, I'm continuing to check, and I really hope that Scott Duffey can get on. I'm just going to let him know one last time. Scott has very limited time today, so we were going to do an abridged version of this, which is why I decided to do story time with Phil and Scott. Again, please look at the thumbnail. It will tell you all you need to know. Scott and Phil, between them, have probably 19,347 unbelievable stories from their law enforcement days, and I'm just going to start to ask them about those. But Phil, I felt a little bit like you and Scott today, and I'll tell you why. I felt like an American hero, and you might be wondering why I'm saying this. Are you?
Well, now that you said it, yes, I am. I am curious.
So let me just tell you, I had a business call from 11:30 to 12:30, and there's a little cafe just maybe 3 stores down from where my little hovel of a studio is. And so I said to myself, I'm going to grab something very quickly, knowing that I had the show at 1 o'clock. There's a press of Miami Heat, as there always is in the summertime, and I run down to grab a bite to eat. And lo and behold, suddenly I see a woman, appears to be in her 50s, and she's not looking completely great, and she just topples over, and lands on the cement, next to her car. Uh, I did not know what else to do. It was right in front of the Coffee Break restaurant, which is my little spot. Coffee Break, shout out to Coffee Break. So I did what any American citizen in that moment would do, and I picked up my cell phone and I called 911. She looked peaked. She looked a sheet of white. She's an African American woman, but she was very pale and pasty and sweaty, and she didn't look well. And she kind of smacked her head as she fell on her car.
Mm.
Suddenly, the staff came over. I was there. I urged her not to get up, and she stayed down. And next thing you know, I'm on with 911, speaking to them. They asked me a series of questions, and within a matter of 5 minutes, police showed up, followed by Miami-Dade Fire Rescue. She appears okay, a little out of sorts. I was asked to ask her a series of questions. Turns out she has high blood pressure, and she looked very out of it. What no one realized was that her young daughter was in the car. I mean, she's old enough to drive, but much younger. So the daughter came out. I have to switch them because Phil cannot handle it, not even for a second. There we go. We're all reunited. Scott Duffey, very happy to see you. And I'm just telling Phil and you, and Scott's got abbreviated time. We're going to keep this as an abbreviated show today, but I'm telling them why I feel like an American hero like you and Phil today. And I've been telling this story. I was on my way to lunch right here. A woman topples over, smacks her head against a car, and appeared to be passing out, and did pass out. And I called 911 because I didn't know what else to do. The restaurant staff started to come out. She was very, very pale. Did not, and then when you got on, I had left off with what we did not know was her daughter is of driving age. She comes around. I'm still on the phone with 911. They're asking me to ask her if she has health issues. She says she has high blood pressure. She did not look well, but she looked like she was coming around. I'm one of these people, when I see someone pass out, I feel like I'm going to pass out. It's kind of like if you see someone vomit, then you vomit. But I stayed strong in a moment of utter turmoil, and I called 911, and it's Miami. So my waitress was from, I think, Uruguay, and she was telling me that if you call 911 in Uruguay, they will come 2 hours later. But in this great country of ours, EMS was there within 5 minutes. Police were there within 2 minutes. Phil Waters, did I handle this situation appropriately? And do you consider me now, like yourself, an American hero for stepping in to help a fellow citizen?
Well, you did the right thing. I'm not so sure that calling 911 elevates you to hero status, but you did the right thing. So yes, we're proud of you.
Thank you. Scott Duffey, you're retired FBI. If you were to see a woman faint and bang her head against a car, what would your response be with all your many years of law enforcement?
I want to make sure there's, no damage to the car. Is it her car or my car?
Imagine if it was Phil's Ferrari. Do you imagine that?
Well, that's a different story.
Well, the FBI's got a multi-page procedure that they have to follow when they see something like that.
Yes.
So it might take a longer response time as Scott goes through the qualifications for responding.
Yes, I would agree, Phil. I would have to check to make sure there's a MOU.
Yeah, exactly right.
Memorandum of Understanding for those that are not familiar with that federal acronym.
Right.
Phil and Scott, is this a running joke that the FBI makes you fill out gobs of paperwork, Phil, and basically you're a free agent, Phil?
Well, that's not a joke. That's a fact.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a fact.
That's
Wow. Anyway, I thought since we have very little time that instead of doing the typical big story, because there are no big stories, that's the main reason right now that I'm aware of. And instead of doing the lesser known true crime stories, I would just have story time with Phil and Scott. I thought it'd be a beautiful thing. And I figured we could do this every once in a while. I also want STS Nation to hear if you have a question or a story that you would like Phil or Scott to share. I don't know what they're willing to share, but let me start here, Phil. I guess since I saw someone just pass out, do you remember the first time you were in law enforcement as a Houston police officer? Maybe I don't know why I'm asking this, the first time you saw someone who was no longer alive, no longer with us, and what kind of effect did that have on you? Do you remember the very first time way back? And look, Scott's going through his memory bank. He's raising those eyes. But Phil, do you remember the first time that you came across an unalived human being, and what kind of impact did that have on you? It appears that neither of them remember the first time, so it probably didn't have a huge impact. But go ahead, Phil.
Well, the first time I was in the Marines, and I was officer of the day, and we had a couple of Marines that were coming through the gate in their vehicle, and the guard at the gate stopped them because he smelled a rather unusual aroma coming from their vehicle. And when they checked the trunk, they found another Marine from 10th Marines who had been gift wrapped and stuffed into a sleeping bag, and he was no longer with us.
Wow.
So had to conduct an investigation at that point. So that's the first time.
Wow. Hold. This is in theory, this is your first ever homicide investigation, correct?
I would say that would qualify, yes.
Take us back to that moment. What was at that moment in time, did you ever think that this would be your career path, that you'd be investigating this as a not only a life avocation, but a vocation?
No, I don't think at that time that there was this was even on the horizon. But I just recall that at the time it was my response to it is that we've got this situation, and because of what I was serving at that day, that I knew what my responsibility was to start an investigation. So that was kind of, I guess, my introduction into it. And then later on, I went to the division headquarters and served as in the separations office up there, and then was able to get into some investigations there. So it all kind of started in the Marines, actually. So,
wow, this is fascinating. Sometimes when you ask questions, you just never know. And look at this one from Obituary. I'm going to throw this right to Scott Duffey. We'll do about an hour of this. I don't know what Scott's able to tell us about what he's doing later, if anything. I already said that it's highly confidential, but maybe he'll share something later. I don't know. But Scott Duffey, right to you. We just heard about Phil's very first homicide investigation ever, which came in the Marines. Who would know if you didn't ask? And to you, you have any good stories about the mob? Did you ever investigate the mob or have peripheral ties to investigating the mob in the state of Delaware? I don't know how prevalent they are or not. In Philly, they're around.
Yeah, I would say no. Peripheral, possibly. There were people that I had spoken to over the years or had sat in as a secondary to individuals that would proclaim to have been part of the mob. But no, I've never actively investigated or been part of a mob investigation. Philadelphia, New York, the large cities, obviously, there was always talk that there would be some made individuals living in and around Delaware, but nothing that I actively participated in.
Jimmy McNutty making a good point. Scott is being careful to not get the mob to come back after him. Phil Waters, ever connected to the mob in any investigative manner? Is there a mob in Houston?
Oh, there are elements. So you go back in the history of Houston, there have been elements there, but no, nothing that was ever that I was ever aware of that we had anybody that was attached to the Cosa Nostra.
Phil Waters, you were this could be a very long hour, but I don't think it is, because I think these stories are going to start. They're going to start to flow out. Scott wants to get out of here today. Phil, it's 7 a.m, and the birds are chirping. Phil, are you typically up at this hour, Phil?
Yes.
You are. What time did you get up today? You look perfectly showered, clean, coiffed. What time were you actually awake?
I got up this morning about 6:20.
And what time did you go to bed last night?
6:20 my time.
What time did you go to bed last night?
Oh, around probably midnight.
Wow, you don't need a lot of sleep.
No,
Highly recommend to both.
My lovely bride, though, she does. So she gets her, 12, 14 hours a day.
Oh, good for her. That's me. I highly recommend, more so to Scott Duffey, actually. Please watch Mastermind on Hulu. It's the life story of Ann Burgess, and it shows her working with the FBI before women were allowed to work with the FBI on profiling. It's a fascinating documentary, and both of you will find it interesting, but it's particularly of interest, I think, to the retired FBI agent. Obituary asked a question about the mob because of a book she or he just read about the mafia. I think it's a she. Mafia, mob gangsters. It was fascinating. Phil Waters, I don't know if everyone knows, but you were an undercover narcotics agent. Please take us back to the year and the time of a favorite story of your choosing while undercover. What were you doing? Tell us a good story about this.
I sent you a picture. You see, if I don't know.
Yeah, I have them posted. I'm sure I have the photo. I know I do.
Well, that was a lot of fun. Working undercover. That was, I kind of joked around with of course, my wife didn't really care, but then those were the days of pagers. So and then when we finally got cell phones, they were in the bags, and then we had them hard mounted in our cars. So in those days, the only people that had cell phones were dope dealers and cops. So it was an interesting time, but this was late 80s, early 90s. These were the days of Miami Vice, and I used the Miami Vice show, which I believe was on every Friday, if I'm not mistaken. And those were our training films. So I modeled myself after, I think I may have told this story before, but we got official undercover IDs from the state of Texas, driver's licenses. And we had our undercover names on them, a BS address, and so forth and so on. So it was a legitimate driver's license. And if anyone were to run us through the system, Nugget has just arrived.
Hello, Nugget.
Here, come here, big dog.
I don't get it. Does Nugget have a key to the house? You said he was.
Nugget is here.
But you said Nugget was not at the home last night. Does he have a key to the house? How did he?
Okay. She's all wet, by the way. So we've had rain. So anyway, that was a nice surprise this morning.
But Phil, how did she get into your house? You said she was not in your house.
We leave the door open for her.
Oh, okay.
So,
I was just curious I didn't know if Nugget had a key. I just didn't know.
Well, no, we just leave the door open for her, and she has arrived. So,
and you don't worry about flies or mosquitoes or anything?
No, we don't really have a big. Every once in a while, a random fly might appear. and it is quickly dispatched. So,
Okay. Sorry, I did not mean to interrupt the mob store or the undercover narcotics store.
oh well, no. Anyway, so and they were, if we were dealing with a crook that wanted to check us out, whatever, and would happen to have people inside an agency that would run one of us, then it would be red flagged in Austin that someone was checking out who we were. So it was kind of cool. And I drove a cool car. I had a 5.0 Mustang, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. So and then of course you had to look the part. So I had my 2 earrings and got, grew the beard out, and the ponytail, had a major mullet. It was a lot of fun. Had that was the days of Vanilla Ice, by the way, and so I had lightning bolts shaved in the side of my head, and Ice Baby, and it was I mean, it was just a lot of fun. We in fact, my undercover name was on my driver's license was James Sonny Crockett, which was Don Johnson's role in Miami Vice, and everybody called me Sonny. So it was, and I kind of emulated some of the look, the pastels, and then every once in a while I would revert to my biker mode and get on my Harley and go out and meet somebody, whatever. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. That whole period was a lot of fun, and I've got some memorable moments from that period of time.
Scott Duffey, someone wants to know, Cook 13 Doodle, Cookie, if you've ever encountered the Hells Angels in any capacity in your career.
Yeah, not in a professional setting, not the Hells Angels, their rival, the Pagans, and a couple other more localized, regionalized outlaw motorcycle gangs that would travel through Delaware. Delaware was often a pass-through point from Philadelphia, DC and Baltimore and whatnot. Yes, we had some houses. We did staked out a house here and there. Never to the point of doing anything beyond somebody else. In other words, another FBI agency in another part of the country would say, hey, go take a look at a house or a clubhouse, and we would jot down some tags. But yeah, I would see them with their colors, Hells Angels on the back. They would be passing through 95 in Delaware. I would just pretty much take some pictures and send them wherever, but nothing active that we did in Delaware and the Hells Angels.
And how did the Pagans compare to the Hells Angels? Are they just as violent?
I would say so. They were and probably still are reputable or notable outlaw motorcycle gang. They are well known. The gang, it had been said that in the mid to late 80s, some hardcore, both ATF, FBI, and NYPD, a lot of local and federal investigations that really hit hard in the drug aspect of the investigations in the mid to late 80s, and a lot of them were arrested and then started to get out, and they're doing their typical Fed time, 20-25 years, started to get out about the time that I have just coming on scene. So not quite getting up their muster, but yeah, I would see them from time to time. You knew who they were, they knew who you were, and that was about it.
Had you ever, outside of a bar, would you ever see a line of pagan motorcycles like 20 deep, and do you ever have the urge to kick them over in a domino fashion, or no?
So there was a very popular Hooters bar on Route 13
Heard
in
of it.
Newcastle.
Yeah.
And so that was a very well-known hangout for them. They would go sport their colors, and easily 30, 40 plus in the lot. But
It's a lot of motorcycles. Nikki Cuds, Scott, what are some of your favorite FBI movies? What a beautiful, this is a low key, this is just what I needed today.
yeah, I think my favorite to this day still, well, I'll mention two. There's Silence of the Lambs, which I think is at the top, my number one. I enjoyed it. I could watch it over and over again.
Yeah.
And then I believe it is the first season, not I didn't like the second season of Mindhunters.
Yeah, that was a fantastic show. I wish they would make another season of
Yeah.
that. So that's why you'd like this doc, because what's his name? Wrestler, the guy from the BSU or the BAU, he's featured pretty prominently in the Ann Burgess documentary. You really like the Ann Burgess doc. But Tara Ellis, Phil, can we back up to the Marine in the trunk? Did you find out who killed him and why? Yeah, you seem to just sort of gloss over that very quickly. We're talking about a homicide here. And look at this. Cape Town, South Africa, not Mish Cavernos, but Crystal Ustuzin, coming to us from Cape Town. Thank you, Crystal. Great to have you here. Phil, how did that Marine murder? What was the story with that Marine murder?
Well, there were two Marines that were caught and convicted, court-martialed for the murder. So yes, we brought that to a resolution. They'd had some sort of a dispute, and in those, they were from 10th Marines, which is an artillery division, and the Marines, instead of having open barracks, had decided to use, we called them Holiday Inn barracks, where they had a couple of Marines, 2 or 3 Marines in one room, and then they had, it was like an apartment complex, so I thought was ridiculous. But that was the setup, and 2 of them, some transgression, and they beat the crap out of him, beat him to death, and then when they realized he was dead or dying, they gift wrapped him around his head, plastic duct tape and all that, and then stuffed him into a sleeping bag, and then put him in the trunk of another Marine's car who was unaware of the entire episode. So much to his shock and amazement when he gets stopped at the gate.
Whoa.
The very distinct aroma coming from the trunk. But let me say something about the bikers.
Yeah.
There are 4 major motorcycle gangs, criminal motorcycle gangs in the country. One of them is the Pagans. So the Pagans, the Outlaws, the Hells Angels, and the Bandidos. So the Bandidos are our Texas guys. Hells Angels are West Coast primarily. Pagans are Northeast primarily, and Outlaws are down in your area. They're East Coast, Southern, in Florida, that corridor down there. So when I went to advanced undercover narcotics training with ATF at Glencoe, Georgia, which is the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. They call it FLEETC. I guess that's what it's still called. And we had some trainers there that had worked undercover on the Outlaws. And I mean, I'm talking the deep undercover stuff. And they got up, and it was really interesting listening to them talk, because that's a very dicey situation to work those biker gangs. I think we've probably all seen there's a guy that was an ATF agent that went undercover on the Hells Angels and actually became a patched-in member and that kind of thing. So, but these guys that do that, and these couple of these guys were talking about their experience with the Outlaws. It is very easy for the lines to get blurred about what their job is and then what their relationship becomes with that particular gang and that group of people. And there were a couple of them that really struggled with it. And because the trick is you cannot commit a felony when you're working this undercover stuff, and it's tough to do with these biker things. You've got to really be pretty inventive about how you portray yourself. And couple of these guys, it messed with their heads, and they had to get out of it and went through counseling for, years, and a couple of them were still in counseling. So it was a really interesting lecture period, listening to those guys talk about what they had done. And then when they brought down the outlaws and they arrested, 50, 60 people, it was something from all manner of crimes. And they felt guilty about these people being taken down. And that's what they were in there to do, was to take them down. And so some of these guys, looked at them in the moment and and I guess in a sense they had betrayed this trust. And that just, it kind of messed with a couple of these guys. So, but very interesting, and it was a lot of fun and doing that training. And it was, and then the Bandidos in Texas, we had a large contingency of Bandidos in Montgomery County when I was working for the sheriff's office there. And that's where I did my narcotics work. I worked with DEA, I worked with the FBI, and worked with HPD narcotics and U.S. Customs and so forth. And we would, every once in a while, we would run across Bandidos. They're primarily selling meth, but we got a couple of those guys snatched up. In fact, the national president for the Bandidos, a guy named Jeff Pike, he lived in the area that I live in.
That's not what I would expect the head of the Bandidos name to be, Jeff Pike. It sounds like.
Well, I think he's doing federal time. Well, I don't think, I know he's doing federal time now for, I think, murder, conspiracy to murder, that kind of thing. And
Jeff Pike sounds like he should be the head of the KKK or something. What do you call that? What's the Grand Master?
Yeah, the Bandidos. They're an interesting group of people, and in fact, in 1987, I think it was 87, the national president at the time, Big Al Fracas, died. I think he had cancer, and Big Al, they held his wake at a place called the Firehouse in Montgomery County, which was in the area that I patrolled. And we had, it was quite a gathering of all the Bandidos that could make it. And there were hundreds of them. It was incredible. And we had gone in, my sergeant and I had gone into the Firehouse bar there the day before. We knew that this was happening, and we talked to Tiny, of course, who was not, and just discussed with him, what was going to happen. That, look, you guys do your thing. We'll respect what you're doing here, but let's not turn this into something that none of us want it to be. And they stuck with that. The bad part about it is the next day when they had the thing, there had been a Bandido that had shot a DPS trooper up by Austin and wounded him. Thankfully, he was not killed, but this was a big deal. And now they're having this wake in Montgomery County, and we've got DPS. We had every law enforcement. It was crazy. So we got DPS, we've got the feds, we've got, every federal acronym you can think of. We've got all sorts of people. And I was embarrassed, quite to be honest. I was embarrassed at law enforcement at the way some of them handled this gathering. And it was clear that it was kind of an intimidation thing. I think the expectation was that this knucklehead that shot the trooper was going to show up for this thing. And so, DPS was all waiting to pounce. And, it was just kind of, I remember even some of my people. Some of the I was in patrol in that area, and the SWAT team were moving through the crowd, and one of the guys looks at one guy, and he's got his girlfriend, he's got his old lady with him, and he turns around and says, "I see you brought your dog."
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, why would you say something like that? And and he was trying to be funny. I get it, but and it doesn't matter. I mean, you got to treat people with dignity and respect. I don't care if it's a bunch of bikers or not. And it was just something that he was like they were trying to push the envelope. And my sense was I was really pissed off because I worked patrol out there. So once these jackasses get through stirring up these guys, they're going to leave and go back to wherever they came from. And I'm the one that's going to be sitting there dealing with these guys in a patrol capacity. So I wasn't really happy about some of the performance of some of the law enforcement personnel there. But and then what I really noticed is that if something did go wrong, if it went sideways, that the Bandidos were more organized than law enforcement was, and would probably extract a lot of damage if something were to go wrong. But anyway, sorry to get off on the. I digress, but
I kind of love it. Scott Duffey has retreated into the far corner. Jimmy McNutty, Scott Duffey says, enough of the badass stories. How about a heartwarming story, Scott? This is right up your alley, sensitive Scott. You ever find a kidnapped child alive? Have you ever saved a kitten or a puppy from a sewer? This is a great question from Jimmy McDonough. By the way, everyone at the bottom, just let me know, what do you think of story time with Bill and Scott? Is this a horrific idea, or should we do this again in 6 months? It was just, Scott had limited time today. These guys have stories for days, and I thought it'd be interesting. But Scott Duffey, did you ever save an infant from a fire or a puppy from a sewer? Anything like this? Perhaps a woman fainting against her car, anything like that.
So no, I'm just trying to think. Dogs, cats. I'm going to start with the sewer, though. We had a bunch of ducks and ducklings that were somehow trapped in the sewer. So we managed to find a way by putting a ramp down there, opening up the sewer drain, and then just letting them find their way out. That's my animal story. However, kidnapping wise, you would think as an FBI agent that kidnappings happen quite a bit, and they do, in the sense of more of a parental kidnapping, where ultimately two parents go their separate ways, and then and instead of being able to figure out a custody battle and that which works for everybody, I have been involved in situations where one parent just runs off with the child or children. So those are predominantly the kidnapping stories. However, one kidnapping my whole career. Well, there was two, but the first one did not have a happy ending. But the towards the end of my career, there was a true kidnapping reported. It was a 5-year-old girl snatched from a pretty affluent neighborhood. She was playing with a bunch of kids, neighbors, she was 5 years old, ranging from 5 to 11, 12 years old, neighborhood kids. It was close to dinner time, and a car had circled by, and then came by the second time, and the guy gets out and grabs the 5-year-old and throws her into the back of the car and then disappears, right? That is as traumatizing for everybody, those kids, the parents. So we were quickly called. So, today's day and age, there's no waiting. There's no 24 hours. There's no, the FBI will get involved. It is as immediate as getting the call. And so having a very close relationship with the Newcastle County Police, who were the primary investigators. I got the call, and immediately went in. So when that happens, you call the cavalry, and anybody's going to drop everything they're doing and head into the office for whatever possible lead. So, and we also have a unit. It's now a regional nationalized unit. It is the Child Abduction Rapid Response Team and deployment team, and so they come in, and they're great with regards to, they have their uh, their cellular analysis experts, and then other agents who just train. That's what they do. And they have, the go-to search warrants, the go-to arrest warrants, whatever it is, to be able to start figuring out, hey, phone locations, what do we have, car description. They just know how to do what they do. So brought that team in, and then of course we went in to the Newcastle County, and that's where we set up. FBI partnered with our local Newcastle, and you then confirm this is an absolute true stranger danger child kidnapping, which does not happen often in Delaware.
What year is this? What year is this?
This, I believe, is 2000. It's either 2015 or 16.
Wow. And how old is the child again?
Child is 5.
5. Wow. Okay. So walk us through this.
This is just around dinner time. This is what you would think is a safe time, especially when a child is out with friends, neighbors. They're all watching. And these kids they reacted and acted and immediately got on to with partial descriptions and partial tag descriptions, car description, and this 20 something, which I believe it was I ended up being a 25-year-old white male. So the hours had gone by, and we are flooding, as the behind the scenes is happening, and that's a cellular analysis. That's what are we coming up with, and then trying to figure out, okay, what can we do to find this girl? So you assume the worst, right? There's nothing good that's going to come about this. And gosh, I want to say it was probably somewhere in the wee hours, late at night. I tell you, if anyone who did not believe who was involved with that investigation, that there is a God, I think they were clearly mistaken, and immediate conversion. So a young, not a young woman, but a woman who ended up being a witness is driving past a strip mall. So imagine how many times, it's after hours, so the businesses are closed, typical strip mall. Lights are on in the parking lot, and she's driving by. This is probably Route 2. This is a semi-highway, 45. Most people are doing in excess of that. So you're just driving by, and she noticed what she thought was a child. This was a naked 5-year-old child walking, peering through the windows of these closed businesses. She could have easily, that's a figment of my imagination. She pulled around, went in, immediately confirmed, my God, what am I seeing? And of course, the word is out there that an active kidnapping has taken place. But unless you're tuning in, social media, radio, TV, you just don't know. So she immediately got a blanket out of her car, put it around the child, brought the child into her car, and called 911. And then, of course, the cavalry had gone to the location. and confirmed this is our kidnapped child, alive, well, and immediately returned back to the family after a medical evaluation. And ultimately, what was gathered was that this individual, who had since now been located, arrested, and I believe is serving, if it's not life, it's up there,
Wow.
that he kidnapped this child, that he had observed the child, was in that neighborhood, um, and then just decided, this is the child I'm going to kidnap. The
Wow.
hours, I won't get into what investigation had to what they believed had determined during those hours, but we know from our investigation that when this individual, with all intent purposes, wanted to kill this child.
Mm.
And so what he did is he brought the child to a lake nearby that about a quarter mile, maybe even a half mile. So I just want you to get an idea of what this child did to survive. He brought the child out and he threw the child into the lake, into this retention pond,
Jeez.
with all the intentions of killing, drowning.
Oof.
And thank God that's what he did, because he turned around and he left in the dark. It's pitch black, absolutely pitch black. What he did not see, but the guardian angel absolutely brought, it was no higher than her knees. And she stood up. I cannot imagine, as a 5-year-old, what just happened. And she saw a dim light, the lights from the parking lot in this strip mall, through a wooded area. So here she gets up out of the water,
Wow.
walks through the woods to this light, saying that light, that's where mom and dad are. So she managed to find that light, and this beautiful witness, you know, managed to recover that child. So that in of itself, to be towards the end of my career as well, was just an amazing everything imaginable. And when I say everything, every law enforcement officer, detective, everybody bringing to the table whatever it is that they could do to find the child, and then ultimately to find this guy. Just an amazing thing that I could say, wow, never want to be a part of those things, but if they're going to happen, I was glad to have been part of something that ended up being extremely successful and bringing that child back home.
Wow. What you never know what you're gonna get with story time with Phil and Scott. This was never heard this story. Incredible. And I have to ask, did you ever, or did anyone that you know ever follow up with this young girl who's now probably, you know, 10, 12 years old or so, right?
Yeah. So the kidnapper was ultimately prosecuted in the state court, and I do not know. Um, the uh, the outcome with regards to, hey, the years and so forth. But I know, especially from working with that department, especially working with any of the departments in Delaware, their victim witness, their therapies, are just second to none. And I can only imagine that she has at her disposal, not only her but also her family, all the therapy that's needed. And then imagine, as a 5-year-old, just how a young child's mind manages to really self heal in ways that I don't think we're capable of understanding.
Wow. What a story. Literally, she sees the light at the end of the story. Um, Phil Waters, in all your years of pursuing killers, who's the scariest killer that you ever came across? I guess from either a method of killing or just physically a scary human being. I know you're an alpha male. I know not much scares you. With that caveat, who's the scariest?
Well, I don't know that I would describe any of them as scary.
Perhaps the most notorious.
Well, gosh, I mean that runs the gamut, right? I mean, it kind of depends on what they did. I know there was actually wasn't my case. I was brought in to interview this person, and in fact, in this case, the lead detective in this thing had brought in the FBI's criminal minds people to do a profile. And I just remember sitting in the room on the conference call and listening to what they were saying. And I just turned to the guy, to the detective, and I said, well, I just said that like 10 minutes ago. But anyway, but it was kind of funny. But this guy was I would not say notorious necessarily, but he was one of the coldest individuals. I really hate these discussions about these child things. This was not a good outcome. He had beaten his 4-year-old boy to death because he wet the bed, and had disposed of the body. And we never found the body. We went out to the dump and everything else. But that guy was just like ice, considering what he had done. Never would confess. We got close. I spent 12 hours with him. And the thing that I'd not 12 hours all at one time, but 12 hours in a sequence of interviews. And it was apparent to me that he's just one of these people. Now, he was one of the folks that had come over for Katrina, so we affectionately refer to them as Katricians. But he came over and we had that discussion. Started out as a missing persons case. So missing persons detectives got in there first. There were some opportunities that were lost that I discovered after I had interviewed him. And I said, look, he's not going to talk. He's one of these guys. It's just not going to speak. And then they ran. That's when they got FBI on the line and all this other stuff. They started running in people. This guy got interviewed by 6 or 7 different people, and it became kind of a show. But anyway, that guy, the only thing that I remembered about him that really stood out was the whole time that I was in there with him, there was never any, and Scott can identify with this, there was never anything about his persona that really changed throughout the course of the interview. So it was hard to gauge the guy, except for the fact that he just was not going to give me any information. So he didn't do anything that I could register. I knew he'd done it. He knew he did it. He knew I knew he did it. But he's just one of these guys, that it's just not going to do it. Now, throughout the 12 hours, and I was done. I told him, I said at the end of it, I said, look, I said, I'm not going to be speaking with you any longer. And there may be some other people coming and talk to you. And I thanked him. I said, I appreciate the fact that you've chosen to speak with me, these many occasions and all this time. And I appreciate it. And I'm just hoping that you'll find it in your heart to tell the truth about what happened, because we would like to find your son. And I got up to leave, and he said, Mr. Waters, and I said, yeah. And I turned around. He said, the minute you walked in the room, I knew that you were a man of God. And that just knocked me over. I mean, I don't bring God into the interview room in the sense that I talk about that, but it was an interesting observation and that he had made. And I just said, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I said, I'll keep you in my prayers. And I walked out of there. And, I went home and told my wife that story. And I just said, that was an amazing moment at that point in time. And I don't know if it had a longer term effect on him, but eventually he was tried for capital murder and was convicted, and he's doing life with no parole. So,
Yeah. Scott, is this the guy, Daniel Santucci?
Good research. Yeah. So I was just doubling up. So it was 2017 was the year, and Dan Santucci was the kidnapper who is serving life.
Wow. Jimmy McNutty on top of things. Phil Waters, when you could not elicit a reaction from this person, being the arguably the best interviewer, I don't call you the interrogator, but the best interviewer in the country, how frustrating was that for you that you could not elicit a reaction even from him?
well, that's always frustrating. I mean, there are just some people that they're just not going to talk. They're just not going to make any admissions. They're not going to confess. And he was one of those. And, all I was hoping for was the ultimate outcome, which is what happened. He gets convicted for this thing. The only other thing that did not happen was we as I've already mentioned, we never did recover the body. But he was just one of those guys. He was just one of those. I remember his name to this day, and remember that moment in time with spending all that time with him. Because look, and Scott can identify with this too. This time in the interview room with these people, you're developing a relationship in a very short period of time that becomes very deep. And it's whether you get the confession or not, you still have this relationship that you've established with these people. And you never know later on where that may serve another purpose. And because of that relationship, that person is more willing to open up. So, and I had a couple of cases like that where I did an interview, got confessions. Later on, those people popped up in other investigations years later. And I was asked to come in and speak with them because they were not being cooperative in that current investigation. And when I walked in, eyes lit up and how you doing, Mr. Waters, and hugs, and sit down and have a chat with them and say, look, these guys really need your help. And I would really appreciate it if you would give it to them. And they did. So you just never know what's going to happen in that interview room and what kind of relationship you're going to have that may produce something later on, even if it failed at that moment in time.
Lee wants to know, Phil, did you work with Kelly Siegler? And don't have any idea who this person is. Maybe you do.
Kelly Siegler, you know who Kelly Siegler is.
I do. Who's Kelly Siegler?
Cold Justice. So she's got she's got another show on now called Prosecuting Evil, I think.
What do I know? What do I know? Okay.
And I do know Kelly. Hot shot. That gal, we used to call her the Black Widow because she never lost a capital death penalty case. But in fact, she tried one of my death penalty cases, and so she's awesome. In fact, she was at CrimeCon last year.
Obituary telling me, former prosecutor in Houston.
Yeah.
Scott Duffey, perhaps the most important question of the day, the chair. This has come up before. Royal blue and black. It's a beautiful chair. It's a high chair. Sometimes when Phil gets into his story, you recline into it. You sit back, but what kind of chair? It's a gaming chair, from what I understand.
Yes, it's a Helix gaming chair. I steal it from one of my sons. So he's he can't be on it when I'm doing an important show with you, Joel.
I
So
love it.
yeah, very comfortable and
Well, if you're
very
going to
enjoyable.
sit and game for hours on end, might as well have a comfortable chair. This is a question for both of you simultaneously from Twyla Olson. Phil and Scott, how hard is it to I've sort of asked you this, Phil, but to keep your composure with someone like this guy who murdered his 3 boys in Ohio, Dorman, I forget his first name myself, or Chris Watts, who's a family annihilator, with the worst of the worst, Scott Duffey, when I know what you really want to do is swing him in the forehead with a good old Philadelphia baseball bat, but you can't. How difficult is it to maintain your professionalism, especially if you're being attituded, if you're getting attitude from these people on top of it? How hard is it to remain professional with the worst of the worst?
I think by the time that I had reached this point in my career and was doing interviews and really enjoyed all the schools that I've gone into, and you realize what the interview is and what where it will get you with regards to a case. So I made it. It's almost like doing a project. It is. I realize it is the absolute pinnacle to get a confession, and I really believed that in order to get a confession, and Phil's right, there are certain people that just will never talk. There are certain people that ultimately they'll never break. But I also believe they are far and few in between, and with the right set, well, I would say with the right desire, and then of course the right tools. If you believe in your craft, and I believe the FBI, at least from what I have gone through with the Reed School and the FBI school, and then of course I went through an Israeli school of interrogation, that
Ooh, how was that? I'm
ultimately
curious. Did you do that in Israel? I have to interrupt there
I did
because
that. Yeah,
I'll tell you why I asked that question, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I did. Whenever you fly to Israel, whenever I fly to Israel, it's typically on El Al, and El Al has the toughest. El Al, by the way, in Hebrew means up and away. For those who did not know, it's kind of like a slang. But anyway, long story short, they ask you 40 million questions, and they will ask your wife 40
Yeah.
million questions,
Mhm.
and they will ask you separately, and then they will re-ask you, and then they might ask your kid a question. So they are experts at
Yeah.
interrogation. And every time I fly, I get a little nervous because they're asking you so many questions. So was that in Israel, Scott Duffey?
Yeah. I'll come back to my story, but
Yeah.
I'll finish up with the Tel Aviv, how I left Tel Aviv. So I went on official travel. That means I travel with the FBI for the purposes of being over their legal attaché office. At the time was Tel Aviv. Now I believe it's Jerusalem. And so at the conclusion of this school, and it was a 2-week intense school. At the conclusion of the school, they gave you a beautiful book. I mean, a beautiful book. They also gave you a class picture of everybody that had been in the class, and the pictures were all the pictures of each and every one of the FBI agents in the class were taken at different times during their stay in Israel. So it's not like you posed for your picture. This picture was taken, and they were obviously caught off guard pictures, which I thought was also a nice anecdote. But so
What?
they gave you this beautiful picture book, and it was it's on my coffee table in my office at Wilmington University, and it says to Scott, thank you for your graciousness and your spending time in our country, and for attending the interview interrogation school. And they give you this book. So for anyone that's traveled, anyone that had ever, but especially to Israel, they do tell you when you're leaving, there are certain things you cannot take with you. Um, and if you take, they have to be a very minimum, or you have to show that you purchased them. Do you know where I'm going at with regards to the salts and the Dead Sea and the baths? These amazing Dead
Minerals,
Sea
like the
products,
minerals. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So anyways, you know, okay, if you purchase to bring it over, you have to basically show what they're going to be used for. And so while leaving, they said to us, whatever you do, this was to the FBI class, you will not tell anybody that this book is a gift. Anybody. We're like, what does that mean? Anybody.
Mm.
What? And of course, it was a gift. It was given to me. I didn't pay for it. So they put that in your head, and I really believe to this day, this was the last part of their instruction. And so I get to the airport. It's late at night, and I am next to another FBI agent, and who had gone through the class. And so I'm watching him, and I always watch everybody who's in front of me if they're go through that ringer of extra security. I want to know what they're going through, and then try to learn from it, so in case it's going to happen to me. So the FBI agent had all his stuff taken out of his suitcases, and young. I'm 22, 23 years old. This young, let's just call him interviewer, pulls out this book, the book that I have, and the book that's in my suitcase, and he goes, "Where'd you get this?" And so the young agent said, I just got it. And he goes, but is this a gift? That was the question. Is this a gift? And so the agent's like, is it a gift? Now, let me preface, when they tell you we're giving this book to you, but don't ever tell anybody it's a gift, what are they asking you? Are they asking you to lie and say, no, it wasn't a gift? Or are they giving you something almost to set you up for failure? And so I watched this agent over this stupid book. I mean, it's a beautiful book, but it's not something you can't have. And this agent started to sweat, and so then he lied. He goes, "No, I bought the book." I was like, "Oh, you shouldn't have said that. You didn't buy the book." And they're going to ask you for a receipt. So the agent was taken to a room. And so now I come up there, and so I'm learning. It's like, okay, they can have the book if they want it. I'll give it back to them. And so the young, same male, says, "Hey, there's we just did a X-ray of your suitcase, and it looks like there's something there. What is it?" "It's a book." And they're like, "Would you take it out?" "Sure, I'll take it out." And I take it out, and I said, "It's the same book that the other guy had." And they goes, "Is it a gift?" I said, "No, it's not a gift." They're like, "Did you pay for it?" "No, I didn't pay for it." And so he's left with, "Oh, if it's not a gift and you didn't pay for it, how'd you get it? Did you steal it?" And I said, "Let's just say the book was given to me for services that I had rendered. How's that?" That was it. As soon as I said that, a an older male, who I believe was somewhere in the government, flashed some credentials to the young male, quickly put the book back in my suitcase, and said, "Come with me. I'm going to take you through a special processing." I went right through onto the plane. So I believe that was that last moment to test you. Hey, have you learned what we just taught you? And can you find that, what I believe is that gray area of lying, telling the truth, and so forth.
Wow.
So in the interview room, I found it I had a lot of passion for, can I get someone to confess against themselves for things that an ordinary person would otherwise think? Why would you confess to something if you're looking at a considerable amount of time or something as a consequence? And why would you not ask for an attorney and just get rid of all that anxiety? And so that's what I've learned and really enjoyed. It is a craft,
Mm.
and and you have to believe in it. You have to live it in order
Wow.
to sell it, and that's ultimately.
In a
And
sentence or less, what's the biggest takeaway from the Israeli interrogation school?
I believe
Like, what's the biggest tool?
they are some of the best interviewers in all of military and law enforcement. They absolutely understand human behavior.
Wow. Amazing. Who knew that story time would evolve into this? And by the way, story time has to end soon because we're already over time with Scott Duffey. But I have to ask, Phil, I know the answer to this question. Vesper wants to know, Phil, were you involved in a criminal investigation where the perpetrator was, as you like to say, permanently rehabilitated? You've had more than one, correct?
Yes, involved in 9 different investigations where
9 different. Wow. Let me ask you this. What is that like for you? Just take one as an example. It's got to be bittersweet. You get your guy. There's losers all around. I mean, and I'm talking victims. People are, and then the the, the perpetrator who causes this is also then taken. It's very sad, is what I'm saying. It's a sad event, not necessarily a happy event, but how did it play on your own emotions when you were able to apprehend someone who then pays the ultimate price for their crime?
Well, I was part of putting 9 people on death row. 2 of them are cop killers. 4 of them have been rehabilitated, and I sleep very well at night. These are people that have gone out and committed a capital crime. They've made a choice to do this for whatever their reasoning was, and they pay the price that the jury deemed they should pay. So I don't have any particular emotion in it, except when it comes to the cop killers, in the sense that there is a sense of finality when that person is rehabilitated. So, and people have different views about that, death penalty, this and that, which neither here nor there for me. It's just they're paying the ultimate price, a consequence for committing the ultimate crime, and I just don't have any issue with that. So, and I can tell you that there's not been one person that I have sent to death row or to prison that didn't do it. They did it. They were all the people. They were the right people. They were the right people who did the wrong thing, and they were convicted, and a measure of justice was served. And as I've said before, what my hope is that there'll be some peace brought to those families that were affected by their loved one being taken from them by an act of violence. So, I don't really argue the politics of the death penalty, and I have no problem with it being utilized with people who've been convicted of those capital crimes.
I thought to myself last night, I've got COVID. I've had a rough few days. No secret. The COE and I had a mini brawl. That's what life is. Marriage is also about brawling with your spouse. We've made up, love each other, love my kids. It was a long week. It was a rough week. Took out some crap on Carm. It was a rough week. Let's put it that way. It's weird at this point now that I've had COVID. Never had COVID during the whole pandemic for the first 3 years. Now I probably had it 97 times, so I know when I get it. I feel like crap, and I did not rest properly. I'm not whining, but I'm just letting everybody know. So here's to a better week next week. But you can never end a week on a better note than with Phil and Scott. I have to ask a final set of quick questions, just to paint the picture of these lovely men. And I already forgot what the two questions were. What were they? Oh, Phil Waters, it was, what's your favorite color and what is your favorite song? I want to humanize you to our audience. Do you have a favorite color, Phil? Is it green? You have a green shirt on.
Well, I would say a combination of blues and greens, I would say. Of course, in cars, I prefer red or black. So it kind of depends on where we are applying the color. So,
by the way, Phil, not to interrupt, but I did again. Bundy Data let us know that she, I believe, is out. Maybe it's a he. I really don't know. It's a very genderless name, but Bundy, whoever Bundy Data is, and as a friend of the show, because they're always here, they were mowing the lawn with one of those rotary old-fashioned mowers. Have you ever done that, Phil Waters, in your time on this earth?
I had many years ago, but I now have a Scag Zero Turn, which is my second favorite vehicle to drive.
Scag Zero Turn. I'm gonna Google that. I have no idea what that means. I just know it's a lawnmower. Do you have a favorite song, Phil Waters?
Oh, I've got a whole slew of favorite songs.
Give us one. Give us one.
Oh gosh. Yes, I mean I don't know. I've got I could name you Eagles songs. I could name you Casting Crown songs. I mean,
what about a Johnny Cash song?
Well, my favorite Johnny Cash song is the one he did right before he passed away. And I cannot remember the name of it, but it is really
Hurt. Is it Hurt? Is that the name of the song?
Yeah.
It's a great song.
Very profound. It's really a cool song. And he's the only one, and in my opinion, he's the only one that could sing that song the right way. So yeah, that's a really cool song. But yeah, it would be hard for me to pin down. One of my favorite songs is the Star Spangled Banner. So
yeah. You know what's interesting about that? One of the hostages who just returned, I forget who, is a real patriot. He said that the one thing that got him through being in a Russian prison was he would wake up every morning and sing the Star Spangled Banner out loud. I'm surprised he didn't get beat up for that, but that's what was revealed last night. Phil, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, your Ferrari, the one back in Houston now, has been in the shop for hundreds, if not thousands of days. Is the paint job almost a year? A year. That's Scott Duffey, can you wrap your head around that? Keeping a car in a shop for a year. Never heard of this in my life. Is the paint any closer to drying, I guess?
Oh yeah. The paint is done. It looks, the guy that's doing it, Romero, is awesome. He's really into it, which is a benefit. And then he's going to wrap it with the protective shield on it. So we're going to wrap the entire car. And the one in Houston is giallo, and the one here is red.
What's giallo? Is that yellow? Yellow. And what did you say? The only thing that could probably top story time is if we bring, is his name Romero, did you say?
Romero, yes.
We should bring him on the show one week. It would be fascinating. It'd be like Abby Tahaha, except different.
He's a busy man. I don't know he's got the time. He's also a Houston firefighter. So
wow.
I always joke about that firemen don't have real jobs. That's why all of them have these other jobs.
I was gonna say every firefighter and police officer I know, they're all worth like Mark Zuckerberg money because they all have these amazing other professions that they dabble in.
Yeah, but firefighters, I mean, like I said, I kid around with my firefighter brothers and sisters. I mean, they go into the firehouse like, 3 days a month and sleep and eat. But I will tell you this, I would not do what they do. They are an amazing group of people. And I tell you what, I've had to go make the scene of. We had a real tragedy with some firefighters. Multiple firefighters were killed in a fire, and we went out. Of course, we're assigned to go out and work it, and so they're incredible people. And I would not do what they do. I've never found any sense in running into a burning building.
Yeah,
so.
That's a very difficult job, no doubt. And by the way, they were the first ones here when this woman fainted today. Scott Duffey, your favorite color, your favorite song, and then we'll all say goodbye. I've already dipped. And by the way, Scott, I know this is highly confidential, perhaps the most confidential of anything that you ever even dealt with at the FBI. I'd like to give STS Nation a slight inkling into what you're up to, or not even a little bit.
Yeah, well, I won't say what it is. I'll say in that I will be more than happy to talk about behind the scenes when it is finished. But it is I've been asked and gracious enough to accept having been working on a FBI related story for an HBO series. So
so you're like a consultant. You're like a consultant.
Yeah. It's been real.
Yeah. What's it like, Scott Duffey? This will be my final question. I guess besides your favorite song, what's it like to know that famous actors portray you and Phil in the movies? Is it an honor that they?
It's real when you realize, especially I would think in law enforcement, federal, state, local, whatever, so many shows, series, movies that are made about this profession. So it's to have been a part of the real aspect of it, and then to offer that to people who have amazing minds to create these movies or shows, and people go see it, that I can give something of a realness to it so they can add it. But it is Hollywood.
Absolutely amazing. Favorite color, Scott? Favorite song?
I want to say green. It
Green.
used to be blue, but there are different versions of green blue that I really enjoy. I think it takes me back to the beach, so that's why those colors. And I don't have a favorite song, but I will say at the top is Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror.
Wow. What you learn when you do a show simply called Story Time with Scott and Phil. Some might find this shocking. My favorite color is neon pink. No, it's not. By the way, I'm getting a couple of, I'm dabbling with a few different models of an STS hat. So I'll let you guys know how it turns out. Quick reminder, I am, the wife's family is from Los Angeles. So I'm traveling there this coming Friday, a week from today, and then traveling back the following Friday. Hopefully Bill and Scott and I can connect. I don't even know the times of my flights. You'll have to stay tuned, but no matter what, we can always say that we had story time with Scott and Phil. Phil and Scott in a word or less, because Phil has to go, and Scott has to go, and I have to do it. Believe it or not, while I'm away, we're doing some of Surviving My Biggest Cases. I'm about to interview Dr. Detective Troy Looney in 4 minutes. That will air when I'm not here. But Phil and Scott, I'd be remiss. Did you yourselves enjoy story time with Phil and Scott, Phil?
You talking to me?
Yeah, I'm talking to you. Yeah, you.
Okay. Yeah, no, this has been great. It's here on the island. We call it Talking Story. So I have enjoyed talking story with you guys. And hopefully there won't be anything that was said here that will not evoke some sort of emotional response.
I think you're safe today, Phil. I think you're
So,
safe.
well, you never know. You never know. And but no, it's been fun, and we ought to do it again. I think. I guess we can see what STS Nation wants to do, but
we'll see what they say. And by the way, thank you so much, Jennifer Levy. This Monday and Tuesday, we're planning to do Ellen Greenberg shows. We've got a woman who's been investigating the case, and we're trying to get another woman from the Philadelphia Inquirer, a paper that Scott Duffey reads regularly, to talk about Ellen Greenberg. This case is now going to be looked at by the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So we're getting closer to justice. And, I didn't even ask Scott Duffey, and maybe I will. This is his world. I don't know if he's willing or able, but I'll circle back with Scott because we're going to be doing kind of a overview of this. And then on Tuesday, Ellen's parents, Josh and Sandy, are going to come on, hopefully with their attorney, they are coming on, but I've reached out to the attorney. But thank you all for being here. Scott Duffey, I'm just a half hour over, but I tried to limit ourselves. IGG is assuring Phil, no panties in a wad today. Love you, America. Love you, Phil and Scott. Love you, Houston. Love you, the Big Island. Love you, Delaware, Philadelphia, and Tasmania.